Hello world. In this video we're going to explore whether a large language model can replace our SQL skills. Now for that I have created a little Python code, and let's go through the code and then figure out whether a large language model and also which large language model could replace our SQL skills. Now let's get started. At first, for this example, I'm gonna try out two different LLMs. Of course, first an open source one and then also a commercial one. In this case, I'm going with Ollama as library as well as with OpenAI as my LLM for the commercial side. So then I'm gonna use SQL Alchemy as my connection to my local MS SQL Server, because this is what I'm using as a database. Of course, you can also use, for instance, SQLite or any other kind of database, like, for instance, a Postgres or anything like that. Now, for that, otherwise, I also need my OpenAI API key, of course, for the commercial model. That's why I'm using OS and .env. So these are the libraries I'm going to import here at the top. And I also instantiate my client here for OpenAI with my environment variable. So if you want to use it the same way as I do, make sure that you have a .env file in the same location, so the same folder, and then also stored your OpenAI API key in this env file. So otherwise, of course, I need to start an engine. So my engine itself is start engine, this function here, which allows me to connect to my MS SQL Server, which in this case is this one here. It has a database, which is the Power BI database, and it has username, password, which I just use to connect, which is ChatGPT, which I'm going to use here, okay? And also, of course, specify the drivers, because if we do this, then we can create engine and then simply use this connection string, so with the username, password, server, database, and the driver, in order to create this connection. So to basically then send SQL commands to our database. So next to that, what I think is best is that we also provide the model with additional information. So not only give us a SQL command, but also how does actually a database look like? Which means, what is the schema of the database? So what kind of tables do we have in the database? Or also, what are the column names of the database? So the more information you provide the model, the better the model, or the better the options for the model are to make a forecast and what is the best SQL query for that, right? So that's why I'm doing the fetch schema here, which is first starting the engine and then creating two SQL queries. The first one is for the tables. In this case, it's this one here, select table name from information.schema tables, where table schema, sorry, is in DBO. This is the default schema, so simply collecting all the names of the tables in the schema. And then, because this returns a tuple, I only want to have the names, and that's the reason why I'm using this list comprehension here, row 0 for row in connection and execute tables. So we execute the, in this case, this statement, which makes sure if you want to use it in SQL Alchemy, you need to wrap it in the text function, otherwise you produce an error. But then we get the, as I said, the tuples, and in order to get only the names of the tables, we just refer to the first element and then use a list comprehension to have simply a list of the table names. That's what this actually does. And after having the list of table names, then for each of the tables, we want to loop through and we want to figure out what are the column names of this table. That's happen here. So this is this table name, table for table and table names. Oh, sorry, that's this one here. In this part here, I want to make sure that I only keep 3 of my tables, because my database, of course, is bigger in size, and I want to make sure that I only want to have 3 tables which have a relation to each other. That's why I'm referring to these 3 tables, but of course you could extend this, right, to use more than only 3 tables. Just make sure that if you have, let's say, a cluttered database as I do, it's probably not the best idea to put all the tables in this or provide all the tables to the model if you do not want to really use them or query them. So that's why I reduce this here. That's the only reason for that. But this is simply selecting the tables. Then what I mentioned before, that's the next part, adding also the column names to the tables. This is this statement here. The columns is, again, a SQL statement wrapped in the text function. Select column name from information schema. The columns where table name equals to double point table. So that's obviously the way to write it in SQL Alchemy. And then I just use, again, connection execute the connection. I'm still inside the context, the wrapper itself here, and then I just execute this for the columns here, and then I edit this as a dictionary to the schema. So basically at the end, what I return here, the schema itself is nothing more than a dictionary containing the table name as the key and all the columns of the table name as the value section. So let me just quickly comment the rest out. Let me do this. Okay, for now. And then let's just execute this just to see that what the result looks like. So if I just say, again, here also a print of the schema, right, like this, and then let me execute it. Make sure that if you do this, that the local SQL server is running on your system. But then let's just say I want to have the schema is equal to, and then the name of this one here, which is fetch schema, so this one here. So let me execute this and say, in this case, Python, and then llama SQL.py. And I run this, and there you can see that's the result. Let me make this bigger just to see that. So you can see we got a dictionary, and we have the table name here, which is orders.tbl, and then we have all the names of the different columns inside this table here. So that's what basically this returns. So let me just uncomment this for now. That was just an example, and also remove or uncomment the print statement here, and then let me just go down again on Discord. Let's also discuss this just in a second. Let me uncomment this, and let's have a look at this, what we're doing here. So after fetching the schema here, we also then have another function in here, which is this one here. Let me drop this down, which is simply executing the query itself, right? So whenever the model, the large language model, then based on the information we provide, creates a query, then of course we want to use this query here. We start the engine, and then we execute the query on the database, and then return the results. This is basically what happens here in this little option here. And then the probably most important thing actually is, how do we now put all the information to the model? So how do we provide the information to the model? Now, of course, there are different ways to do it, and I encourage you to try this out. And also, please comment if you have any ideas how to make it better. I'm really interested in that. But the idea I have here is we use the user query itself. So basically simply a text query on the database, and which should be converted into SQL. Then we provide the schema. The schema we get from the function up here, which we talked about. So the dictionary with the table names and the column names. And then also I specify relationships here, which means that I also provide the model the relationships between the tables. I mean, we could also, well, let the model find this out, but I think it makes sense that you just say, okay, those tables are related in a one-to-many way, for instance, based on these columns. So that's also something I like to provide. As I said, as much information as possible to the model, so it's really clear. And then I specify a role here, your MS SQL Server expert, and then your job is to convert a given request, which is the query itself, into a fast SQL query, and then I also provide the schema of the database, and the schema is a dictionary, also state what it actually is, with the table names and the column names and so on. Then I provide in the context, so basically in here, in this query here, the request, so the question, what should be translated into SQL code, the schema, and also here the relationships, right, which I also like to provide here. And then I also do a little error checking, if you want to call it this way. I just say, if something is slightly misspelled, then try to fix it. So that's also something which I also edit here, and I also say that I only want to have the select statement in this case, right? Or, I mean, if you do data or table manipulation like add and so on, or drop, right? If you use those statements, that you should actually also include this, but for now I only want to return data, so I'm using select statement. I want to start with select. I don't want to have here is your SQL query and then the select statement, right? I want to remove any kind of additional text which I don't need. So that's also specified in here. So that is basically the prompt itself. And then I just specify the messages here, role content, and then I try out the models. So which is either Llama in this case. And with Llama, I'm using the latest Llama 3.2 version, so which came out just a couple of days ago. And optionally, or as an alternative, I'm using from ChatGPT the Model GPT 4 Mini. So these are the two contenders in this case. And then we just return this here, and then I have here my query. So which countries in orders table have total sales bigger than the average total sales across all countries? So that is my question here. And then I fetching the schema, I specify here the relationship in this case, and then I just add the query itself, the schema, as well as the relationship all into this, translate, and provide it to the model, and then I want to have my response. So that's basically the idea. So let's give that a try. So let me just remove this one here, and then give this a try one more time. So Python Llama SQL, and in this case we're running it with the open source version first. Let me execute it and then just see what we get basically. So of course I need to save it first. So let me execute again, CLS, right? And then now one more time. And then we just wait, and it should actually now create a query for us. So here's the query, as you can see. So select DBO supplier name, sum DBO sales as total sales, and so on and so on. So if I take a look at this, well, the supplier name and here the total sales. That's, for instance, actually not what I want, because I specify which countries in the orders table have the total sales bigger than. So obviously this, as a first try, did not really work. So I do not need to be a SQL expert to see that this doesn't work, right? Which is currently specified here. Now, as I said, you might play around with the prompt itself, try to make it better to get better results. You might also try out a different open source model, but from my point of view and the far as I've experienced with it, the Llama 3.2, the latest version, it's really fast. It's great for asking questions in general, but it's not really good with SQL code. That didn't work for me. So, okay, what about an alternative? What about a commercial model? So let's remove this here, and then let's uncomment let's first comment here the two lines for the open source model, and then let's uncomment here the 2 lines for in this case, the commercial model, which is GPT-4 Mini. And then let me just save this also, and then let's run this again. So go in there, and let's just run it, and let's just see what we get now. And here we get our results, and there is select customer country from orders table, group by customer country, and then having some sales greater than select average total sales from, and then another subquery, select some sales as total sales from orders, group by customer country as sales. And this looks much better, really. I mean, this is probably not really optimized, and you might have, well, I probably would have written it with a CTE, so common table expression, and not this way with the subqueries, but still, if I execute this on my system, I should get a valid result. So as you can see here that it really depends on the model. That's of course my experience so far, whether we can replace our own SQL knowledge with a large language model. So with the commercial one, the GPT-4o Mini, for instance, which is not the best model actually from OpenAI, but still a pretty good model, and you can see that this already works for SQL queries. Now, of course, there might be very complex SQL queries which the model cannot currently maybe not fetch and give the right result. That's totally true. I might be with you here, but for the starting point, this is really encouraging that this is already possible. And as I said, you need to try out. You can also try out a different model, so a better model from OpenAI, or for Claude, for instance, on Trophic, and give that a try. But the quintessence here is simply that the open source models did not really work very well here. But the commercial ones work pretty well for the SQL queries I have tried. And that's obviously also what you see here in this video. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and also please share your comments. Have you tried it so far? What are your experiences? Did you like the video? If so, give a thumbs up, and also please subscribe to the channel. Thanks a lot, take care, and see you in the next video. Until then, best guys.